All right, good evening, everyone. Today is Thursday, January 26th. It's 5:30. We're going to get started. We're going to call this meeting to order of the SAU board. We're going to start off actually with the first item on the agenda with our public comment. It's going to be one of two. And if any member of the public would like to address, please, if you're online, follow the instructions that are listed by our interim superintendent, or in person, just come up here to the microphone. We do have one person remotely. Yep. And our guest who's joining us remotely, if you can do me one favor and just state your name, town in which you reside. Your camera does need to be off, and your I'm sorry, your camera needs to be on. My apologies. The block needs to be off.
He just declined panelist.
Okay. Great.
Stands still up.
Okay. All right, Mr. Smiley, if you wanted to address the board, just go ahead and lower your hand and raise it back again, and we'll re-promote you to panelist. Great. Mr. Smiley, you could be joining us as a panelist. If you can just take yourself off mute, make sure your camera is actually on so we can actually see you. And before we do get started, I just want to remind that this board has an obligation. If any of your comments are reflecting any of our candidates for our superintendent, we have an obligation to protect the personal integrity and their reputation. So we would ask that you withhold any specific information about any of the candidates that name them or call them out by name. And you can use general terms. That's just one ask of ours. Mr. Smiley, you have the floor for 3 minutes.
Hi, how's everybody doing today? Hey, Sarah. I am Seth Smiley. My wife, Julie, and I are very active in the Amherst community, and I thank you for your time today.
Mr. Smiley, if you can just begin one more time, we're all set.
Can you hear me?
We can now.
Awesome. I am Seth Smiley. I live at Holly Hill Drive in Amherst with my wife, Julie, and my two sons. Hello?
We can hear you.
Okay. Sorry, I just heard talking in the background. So we live with our two sons, Ben and Sam Smiley. Ben is in middle school. Sam is in high school. We've been very active in Amherst and, of course, supportive of the public schools. We have also been very active historically in recommending and using the science on the later start times being beneficial for the greater good for middle school and high school students. All of the science and evidence supports that for middle schoolers and high schools, the later start time leads to increased productivity and lower rates of depression. There's also evidence to suggest that middle schoolers and especially high schoolers go to sleep later. Both of my children are extremely happy and more satisfied with the later start time. I do understand there's an impact. I wish there was or is a negotiation, because I understand it's challenging for people that have high school sports, as my son does. And he is staying after school today, even with a later start time. And he is okay with it, and his teacher's okay with it. I'm just imploring that the board, the parents, the students, and the teachers understand, in my opinion at least, that this is for the greater good. And it's also the opinion of medical boards out there that students perform better, especially in middle school and high school, with a reasonable start time. 7:30 in the morning is too early for middle schoolers and especially high schoolers that literally their body clocks are different. They're not getting enough sleep at that time. So I hope that we keep the start times at 8:30 for the middle school and the high school. Thank you very much.
Any other members of the public who would like to address the board? Seeing none, we will move on. And before we do move on, Ms. Lawrence is joining us remotely. Ms. Lawrence, if you can just identify yourself, tell us that you are where you are, if you're alone or not, and it was impossible for you to be here.
This is Sarah Lawrence. I am at home and alone, and it was impossible for me to attend in person this evening.
Thank you. All right, let's move on to the first item on our agenda besides public comment is the consent agenda. We'll go down 1 through 4, see if there's any issues with any of those 4. Any questions or concerns about number 1? Number 2? Number 3? And number 4? Great, seeing no concerns, let's go ahead and take a motion to accept and adopt the consent agenda. Motion's made by Ms. Clark, seconded by
I'll second.
Ms. Parisi. Let's go ahead and do a roll call vote, starting with Mr. Torres, assuming there's no discussion.
Peters, yes.
Day, yes.
Grund, yes.
Zimmerman, yes.
Conklin, yes.
O'Keefe, yes.
Beam, yes.
Gothier, yes.
Parisi, yes.
White, yes.
Glover, yes.
And Pete, because you weren't here for this particular portion, we can't have you vote, but Ms. Lawrence.
Lawrence, yes.
Great, thank you. That motion passes. Next, we're going to move on to our board chair updates, and just due to weather conditions, we're going to do Mount Vernon first with Chairperson Ms. Lawrence.
Thank you so much. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, great. Our board met on January 5th. We heard an update from Assistant Superintendent Landwirl on our science curriculum. We also had Ms. Facey, the business administrator, present our FY24 draft budget. We reviewed the executive summary, the proposed and the default. The board had a discussion about our public hearing presentation slides. And then we made a motion to approve the warrant articles as presented. Our operating budget is $6,349,450. Default $6,266,304. We have a property maintenance fund warrant, the Mount Vernon Village School renovation or addition study warrant, a students with disabilities fund warrant, and a health and dental insurance fund warrant. Thank you.
All right, so we met last week on the 19th of January. One of the things that we did in that meeting was have a pretty robust conversation with Ways and Means on the 2 big items that we have left that we hadn't discussed with them. One of them was the facilities project. Our partners at Banwell and DEW were on hand to answer a lot of questions. So we thank them for showing up and working with us, as they're technically not under any sort of contract with us, but still being great partners with this as we get closer to voting day. Our deliberative guide overall is done. We will be posting this on the SAU website, and then we'll be sharing it in as many places as we can as well to make sure that we get all the reasoning and some accurate information to our thoughts behind this process and what we were putting on budgets and articles and contracts. That does include the 2 contracts with our teaching units, the ASSA and the AEA as well. So that information will be posted shortly. Planning is underway on our water type projects over at AMS, and then I think that was going to be it. Yeah.
Sure. So we had a meeting on January 3rd where we, the first thing we did was we had a public hearing on removing money from our maintenance expendable trust fund for the skylights, which was approved. So we'll start getting work done on those. They need to be ordered, so they'll be in place for the summer in order to be worked on. We pretty much worked on our public hearing then and finalized and moved things forward to the public hearing and had our public hearing as well and moved everything forward to deliberative. Right now, our operating budget is $20,368,691, which is a 2.8% increase from the current year. We also have warrant articles for, I'm gonna get the right amount. The school maintenance expendable trust fund, we're requesting $220,000 to go into that fund from the unassigned fund balance. And the turf field replacement is only $70,000 this year instead of the 85 based on new analysis and work done. And then we're proposing a new technology warrant article that is similar to your capital maintenance fund. So we have a plan on replacing all our technology needs, and we're hoping to start funding that with $25,000 from our unassigned fund balance. That's where we are.
Thank you. Any questions for any of our board members? Let's move on to our school start time survey.
So just to put us on schedule, we surveyed students, families of that are upcoming to our schools, as well as students. And the goal tonight was to provide just a first look to the board and to see if there's any other information or different organization of information that we can do. Kelly, one of our data specialists, is working on it. We did lose a couple of days of work because of the power, of course. But any feedback, our goal is to provide you with the information. If you want additional surveys or additional questions out there, happy to do it. You want the information organized in a different way. We did have some feedback about putting in the questions. We can do that. Put the questions in so it reads a little bit more connected, and then some feedback about organizing by district. Happy to do it. So whatever you want to send me, we'll send it to Kelly. We'll have time. But we have pretty good response rate and pretty good collection of data. So I think it's some good stuff there.
Awesome. Any questions for Mr. Chamberlain? Ms. Grunt?
Having it separated by school would definitely help, or by district, because I think it would be interesting to see
Got it.
how that breaks out. That's,
Happy to do
then
it.
there'll be a
I don't
lot
have a
of,
mouse in my pocket, but Kelly will be happy to do it.
perfect. Thank you.
Ms. Gilliard Zimmerman?
I was gonna say, and getting all the questions, and I think even for the numbers, like question, like no, yes. I mean, I know there's a bunch in the middle at 4 that I think are neutral, but it would help to know, like at the top of each page, have like this is what these different ratings mean.
You got it.
Thank you.
And I'll just throw a comment that you and I talked about earlier. If we can also, with that information, like Ms. Grunt had said, by district, break it up by school. And the reason being is because like the Amherst School District has 2 different start times, whether they're middle school population or their elementary school population. I think it's good to understand sort of the thought process of folks experiencing both, and more importantly, the transition. So any other questions about our school start times? I know the data today is in very raw form. And I think the more broader discussion we're going to have next month, the pros, the cons, community feedback, and whether or not we need to consider making any changes at that point. So that conversation will be saved for our February meeting. Tonight's just us receiving the data, answering any questions in terms of its current structure or format, and making suggestions about reposturing some of that format. Ms. Mead?
All right. So first off, thank you. I think it was a great start. Thank you for having it be such a broad audience. And I liked the questions. I liked everything about it. When you do get it reformatted, putting it someplace that's very visible to the public, because I know they were already starting to read the raw data, and then it kind of went away and they said, wait, where'd it go? And they were trying to extrapolate from it. And I think that kind of like the way that we presented from the superintendent search, like kind of the worms and wonders, I think that maybe having a way to sort of organize that a little more like together, so we see kind of common through lines. I think that would be really helpful too.
I'm hoping to get some support from the Sauhegan High School data class. So they're going to do some stuff for us as well.
Oh, cool.
But what happened was some of the data, we had a little bit of data with a little bit student aid. And so we had to take it up, and we're going to put it back up. We'll make sure it wasn't like crazy stuff, but it was just enough that made, we just wanted to honor some requests from the community.
Privacy.
Yeah. But it wasn't like, it was something we had to fix, but it wasn't horrible.
Great. Any other questions, comments, concerns? Ms. Parisi?
So just before we come to next month's meeting to discuss this again, as a board, I just want to make sure that we clarify what problem this conversation was started because of. And I think that the problem that we started out with, or the question, was how do we set all students up for academic success in correlation with sleep needs that have been researched? If there's a different question or a different problem we were trying to solve, maybe you can share it out with us so that we can all kind of be thinking about it in the same light as each other. And then, like you said, we'll send over some questions. A lot of questions that I have aren't necessarily things that were found in the survey, but they were other pieces that relate to the start time, things like instructional time, scheduling, what our options are for days versus hours in a calendar, and what the athletic participation rates are at both our middle school and high school. So if we have, I'll send over that, those questions, but they're outside of the survey questions.
Yeah, and I would happily include that I plan on providing the board with a memo of some thoughts about it from the data, but also just exactly just said impact on other areas. So whatever you'd like to see, I'm really glad that we're sending this like a month early, so it gives us plenty of time to dig into the data as well as answer questions. But I do expect to provide some thoughts to the board on just my leadership teams.
And to piggyback on that, last year when we heard resounding impacts about specifically at our high school with the athletic programs being released early, we had a presentation from the athletic director, talked about how she was mitigating that into this year. Love to see if that has actually made it a successful impact. I didn't notice as many athletic dismissal comments as there were last year for the high school, but there were an awful lot for the middle school. So maybe we can engage the athletic director at the middle school for a very similar kind of conversation to figure that piece out as well.
You got it.
All right. Any other questions with regards to school start times? Great. Seeing none. The superintendent's report.
Just always happy to reflect upon the work. As I get a chance to talk with the candidates in this process, I was privileged to have Amy and I met with the candidates together. And one of the things from my experience, one of the great attributes of this job is the opportunity to learn. And especially in the last month, we'll see. I wrote about, I've learned about petition warrant articles. I've learned about other hearings with boards. I've learned about deliberatives and public hearings, and also calling a snow day in a 4 district, where one of the biggest things that one thing I learned this week is when I talk to road agents, I have to confirm sidewalks. And I will deliberately and personally ask every morning, how are the roads? But I will also ask, how are the sidewalks, which is very, very, and this is not tone, and this is very serious about making sure the sidewalks are clear. Community has been provide lots of feedback to me on decisions I've made, which I always appreciate. And I'm hopefully there for Jeff and Ben, who we work together very early in the morning. I hope we get a little reprieve in the next week or so, because we've had a lot of events. But in all honesty, this community has provided we've been a lot of grace about a lot of areas as I try to get my arms around an interesting position. But I'm grateful. I've learned so much in the last month, and I love the opportunity to learn. So I appreciate it very much. Happy to answer any questions. I'm really excited about some wellness work we're going to dig into. I wrote about that. I like that kind of stuff. We did have a staff change I wrote about. If you have any questions, and we can talk about that. But it's been a busy but very productive time. So thank you all for your support.
Any questions about the superintendent? School leadership?
So I chimed in online on that discussion and tried to help out a little bit on the calling of school, because I think you're in a hard situation. I mean, if you call early and then the weather turns out, there was a question of, was this morning going to be a mess? And we all woke up this morning and it was absolutely fine. But, there's always going to be some folks who wish you'd called this morning, yesterday afternoon at 4. And then if that had happened this morning, there would have been other folks saying, how come we had school canceled? So I think the way the snow days are scheduled, and that is not scheduled into the calendar, I appreciate the waiting until you have more information. And I think the more we can not have unnecessary snow days, obviously we have to have the necessary ones, but the more we can not have unnecessary snow days and go later in the end of the year, I think the better that is for the overall instructional time. Because it seems like the later you get in June, the more and more checked out everyone is. So, and by everyone, I mean the kids primarily.
I'm with you. The night before call is a new, 5-year event, where before we were all in the morning, the tradition, you wake up and you see what you're doing, but the pressure, you wouldn't believe the pressure about calling it the night before from faculty, from kids, from the community. And it was like, but it's hard because it's a rain snow line. And if you miss it and you call it the night before, you can't pull it back. And I've tried to explain that to people, and they get it. But you're right. And I was in the hall at the SAU High School yesterday, and a youngster walked up and said, "What do you think about tomorrow?" I said, "I think we'll be okay." And I said I was getting killed. He goes, they're tough calls. Like, I just want a 12 to 18 inch on a Friday. That's all I want. I'll call that the night before, I promise. So, but we're not, it's been very interesting snow lines, but the community has been very gracious. As students, I get a lot of advocacy from our students who aren't afraid to share their opinion and feedback about the decisions I need to make and when I make them. So it's all good. But thank you.
Awesome. We're gonna go Ms. Precy and then Ms. B.
I was just wondering about the timeline of the SAU staff change.
So we were noticed. I think we had about 2 months notice, and so we are working on the replacement. We're still, I think the change is soon. Next week. Yeah. So we've been working on it. It's hiring in every position but it was a recruitment by a similar job and with a little bit more responsibility, a little bit more time, but it wasn't possible to meet those demands. It wasn't working environment or climate. It was a recruitment, which we never like, but we understand.
Ms. B.
First off, I appreciate your growth mindset is what we ask of our students and our staff. And so it's nice to hear from the very top down. You have that same mindset. So thank you for acknowledging and being positive about that. Second, I just wanted to give a public call out to our amazing Clark Wilkins staff who, when we were surprised by a sidewalk that was rather impassable, they literally physically jumped out there and made sure that all of our walkers made it safely into the school. And I think that they're used to having outside duty. They're used to being like right near the front, but to literally, from what I understand, they went all the way down to like the beginning of the village. And it is absolutely above and beyond as we've come to expect from our amazing staff. And that's one of the reasons we're so excited to bring forward their new contracts and really support them and love on them. But it's just a great example. And I wanted to publicly acknowledge and thank them. And also to Mr. Gascoigne, who went out later in the day and personally shoveled, and others who also went out there and made sure that in the afternoon it was a little better for the kids. So thank you all around.
Thank you for that notice. It really is in this place, SAU, and the building's all hands on deck. I appreciate that. And I'm a big believer in yes. Yeah.
Ms. Grunt.
Regarding the NWEA Insights report, so we don't have a whole lot of students that take NWEA and we're talking about the SAT, but I'm wondering if there's some sort of summary that should be provided to Sohegan so we understand what we're looking forward to next year for either supports, education, budget impacts, what, if there's anything we need to know.
Yeah, and
what's coming forward.
Christine and I will take a look at this for it. It was just to make sure that it was in your hands because it was in one of our oversight committee hands. The protocol for me is to make sure if it goes there, you guys see it.
Yep.
But yes, happy to address that at the next.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions? I do want to take just a moment to thank you for including the inflation piece in your report. And I think it's very important that the community understand that we're definitely seeing costs spike rather significantly across the entire district. You highlighted really 4 of them right there, including the food service piece where we saw a significant percentage increase in the cost of some of the things that we're feeding our kiddos on a daily basis. So if we can just make sure that the community is aware and very hyper vigilant of the fact that the board is really trying to pay a lot of attention to things that not necessarily that we can control, like obviously the price of meatballs jumping up as much. I guess we can offer, alternatives to meatball subs, but the curriculum software, the diesel, the facility, the vendor thing, I mean, building related materials are up 35%. Like that's an enormous increase that I think is going to start to hit our budgets next year. But thank you for doing that. I appreciate that. Pleasure. Any other questions? Seeing none, let's move on to, I think we have, hold on just a second. Wasn't able to print out my agenda for tonight there. We're gonna move one thing real fast here. Hold on. Do we All right, we're gonna open up our second non-public, public comment period. If anyone would like to address the board from the public, now is an opportunity to do so. If you're online, go ahead and raise your hand. The superintendent will go ahead and identify you. We just ask that you follow the rules that have been posted right there in the webinar chat. And if you're in the community, you'd like to speak to the board, just come up to the chair here and you'll have the floor for 3 minutes. And we do have a statutory required time that's expiring in 4 more minutes. Anybody from the community online?
No hands raised.
Okay. All right. What we'll do is we'll, when we come back from our non-public session, we'll open up the floor again for another public comment, just to make sure that we satisfy the 30-minute requirement. With that said, we can entertain a motion to go into non-public. Motion by Mr. Gothier,
I'll
second by Ms. Grund. I will do a roll call vote, starting with Mr. Torres.
Park, yes.
Peters, yes.
Yes.
Run, yes.
Lily Zimmerman, yes.
Conklin, yes.
Keefe, yes.
Beam, yes.
Gothier, yes.
White, yes. Eckhoff, yes. Glover, yes.
Ms. Lawrence?
Lawrence, yes.
Great. And for members of the public, we anticipate this non-public to be in excess of an hour. So as soon as we are completed, we'll come out and we will relaunch the webinar for public participation.
I did. Yes, thank you.
They were in for a pound. All right, we're back on the record here. Today, you ready? Awesome. All right, first of all, before we get started doing anything else, we're going to entertain a motion to seal the minutes indefinitely.
I'll make a motion to seal the minutes.
Made by Ms. Grund, seconded by Mr. Torres. Roll call vote.
Run, yes. Lily Zimmerman, yes.
Conklin, yes.
O'Keefe, yes.
Beam, yes.
Gothier, yes.
White, yes. Eckhoff, yes. Glover, yes.
Lawrence, yes.
Great. Thank you. And we go. Want to first start off by recognizing Dr. Ken here. Thank you very much for your stewardship over the last 6 months, almost 7 months now. You've been a pleasure to work with, and I'm sure Josh will say a heck of a lot more nicer things than I. But it started off with our conversation that we had when I was with my family at Disney World, and on a line for a ride, you're like talking about family, and that's where it really all comes down to, and that's the reason why we come here every day. So thank you very much for your help in this process. I've personally been very impressed by it, and thank you for your stewardship.
Yeah, I would echo Stephen's thoughts. Dr. De Benedictis has been a huge help in guiding the subcommittee and guiding the search committee. It has been a pleasure to work with you and NESDEC. I can say that I know several years ago we did it all on our own, and I think that was hard. So to have a guide with as much wisdom and knowledge as you has been exceptionally beneficial to us during this process. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Mr. Conklin, would you like to make the motion?
I thought we were talking process first.
Oh, thank you very much. Let's talk about the process. My apologies for about that. Very important step.
So we just want to update the public.
Yeah, shut the mic off.
Shut the mic off. Okay. Okay. Everybody can hear me. The public can hear me.
On Zoom?
Yes, Sarah can hear it.
Okay. So updating the public on the process since our December meeting. So for notes and details about the process from the spring of last year until our December meeting, I would refer the public to notes from our December board meeting, which were approved tonight. They will contain the process up until then. I have also shared with Danae the documents currently on the school website, including the schedule of events that were used as part of the process, and those will be documented in the month's minutes. So what has happened since December? The candidates were asked to and provided a non-public work sample for the board. The candidates visited our communities. They met with teachers, administrators, students, and community members, touring our facilities and answering questions. Over 60 pages of feedback forms were collected on each candidate, distilled into executive summaries, and those summaries and the raw data were shared with the board as a non-public document. Candidates were interviewed by the SAU 39 board in non-public. The Superintendent Search Committee met with our NESDEC representative, Dr. De Benedictis, to discuss how best to make reference checks in the candidate's current or former communities. The subcommittee called between 8 and 9 individuals for each candidate, asking an agreed upon series of questions. They then distilled the results and have shared that with the SAU 39 board as a non-public document. The SAU 39 board met tonight to discuss the candidates in non-public. For those keeping a tally, we did spend a good 2.5, 3 hours on that. So we had some good and valuable discussion, and I really want to thank everyone for that this evening. So, and let me take one more quick second again to thank the search subcommittee, who did a fabulous job throughout this process. It was a lot of hard work, phone calls, meetings, and I really appreciate them. And the screening committee, who also was exceptionally valuable to this process. I really want to thank everybody for that. Without further ado.
Before you
Yes.
get to without further ado, can
Yes.
I say, and thank you, because you put in a tremendous amount of work compiling all the data, preparing everything, shepherding our committee through the process. So we can't leave that off.
Thank you. Thank you.
Good job.
So now with all that said, I would like to make a motion to extend an offer of employment to Mr. Michael Berry as a new superintendent of schools for the Amherst, Mont Vernon, and Sauhegan Cooperative School Districts, SAU number 39. This offer will be contingent upon the successful completion of contract negotiations with the SAU 39 board over the coming weeks.
I second.
Any discussion?
Seeing no discussion, we'll call the vote.
So-
Yes.
No, that was his motion. So I just want to say, for the benefit of the public, before we do the final vote, and for the two candidates who were not selected, that, this was, we were very, very fortunate to have 3 strong candidates here at the end. And this was a hard decision and obviously a lot of discussion. And, depending on the vote, I'm very, very excited for going forward. But I want to thank everyone who applied and put in, and
Thank you.
we were lucky to have a strong pool of people to pick from.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments? Seeing none, let's do a roll call vote. Mr. Troyes.
Clark, yes. Peters, yes.
Yes.
Grund, yes.
Gulay Zimmerman, yes.
Conklin, yes.
O'Keefe, yes.
Beam, yes.
Yes.
Parisi, yes.
White, yes. Eckhoff, yes. Glover, yes.
Ms. Lawrence?
Lawrence, yes.
Great, thank you. That motion passes unanimously. Congratulations to Mr. Berry, and we all look forward to the partnership over the course of the coming years. Thank you.
Congratulations.
Big congratulations. The agenda, because my computer's stuck. Thank you. Public comment period. We need to open up our next piece of public comment.
Our remaining 4 minutes, right?
That's right. Any members of the public that would like to address the board? No, we're
Uh,
open.
got some participants.
Great. And being that we've been back in for more than 3 minutes, I think we're going to be good to go. Do you have the agenda in front of you real fast? Thanks.
Mhm. Look at the bottom of the agenda.
Great. Awesome. We are good. Let's entertain a motion to adjourn. Thank you, everyone. Mr. Torres makes a motion to adjourn, seconded by Ms. Grund. Let's go. Mr. Torres.
Clark, yes. Peters, yes.
Yes.
Grund, yes.
Gulay Zimmerman, yes.
Conklin, yes.
O'Keefe, yes.
Beam, yes.
Yes.
Parisi, yes.
White, yes. Eckhoff, yes. Glover, yes.
Ms. Lawrence.
Lawrence,
Great.
yes.
Thank you, everyone.
Let's convene with